Okay, fun segment. Chris Wallace shocked us all. He's leaving Fox News. Here was his announcement yesterday at the end of the show. Let's take a listen.
After 18 years, this is my final Fox News Sunday. It is the last time, and I say this with real sadness, we will meet like this. 18 years ago, the bosses here at Fox promised me they would never interfere with a guest I booked or a question I asked, and they kept that promise. I have been free to report to the best of my ability, to cover the stories I think are important, to hold our country's leaders to account. It's been a great ride. We've covered 5 presidential elections, interviewed every president since George H.W. Bush, traveled the world sitting down with France's Emmanuel Macron and Russia's Vladimir Putin. And I've gotten to spend Sunday mornings with you. It may sound corny, but I feel we've built a community here. There's a lot you can do on Sunday mornings. The fact you've chosen to spend this hour with us is something I cherish. But after 18 years, I have decided to leave Fox. I want to try something new, to go beyond politics to all the things I'm interested in. I'm ready for a new adventure, and I hope you'll check it out. And so, for the last time, dear friends.
That's it. He's out, Krystal. Hours later, it was announced that that new and exciting adventure is going to be CNN's streaming platform. So let's put that statement up on the screen. Chris Wallace is joining CNN to anchor not on CNN, but CNN Plus, the, what they call much anticipated streaming subscription service. I am thrilled to join CNN Plus after decades in broadcast and cable news. I'm excited to explore the world of streaming. As I embark on this adventure, I'm delighted and honored to join Jeff Zucker and his great team. I can't wait to get started, Chris Wallace said. They said he'll be hosting an interview program for the streaming service. I don't even know what the hell to say about this, Krystal. I mean, what are you doing? This man is 74 years old. He was actually a master of the cable medium. I'm not saying I like Chris Wallace or I don't like cable news even, period. But if cable has one purpose, it's interviewing high-profile people live to millions. That's it. Chris Wallace was actually pretty good at that.
Yeah.
The big interview, you know, the Fox News Sunday. The panel of his was always cringe, but what he was always pretty good at was having on some sort of politician and grilling him. And part of the thing is that even here, whenever you have a politician and them, the fact that they know it's not live, it just doesn't have the same level of stakes. You know, you've worked in live TV, I'm sure it's certainly something where when you have that level, the veneer and everybody's watching, it's just a totally different thing. He was actually pretty good at it. Now he's coming out and trying to hang out with us here in the streaming world. And I got really bad news for CNN for Chris. I'm sure they threw, gobs of money at him. Does anybody want to actually watch a 70-something-year-old dude interview now what he's going to get are only B-rate politicians who don't care that much about his streaming service? Do you actually want to pay and seek that out to watch and stream it? The answer is probably no.
Yeah.
I have no idea what he's doing. I can't imagine going out at CNN Plus after your dad was a legendary newsman and you anchored probably the most watched Sunday show in the whole country. It's a total joke. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I actually have a lot of thoughts about this. I mean, number one, he's the type at Fox News who, of anybody there, he had the most mainstream credibility.
Oh yeah, for sure.
People kind of put him in a category by himself. There's a few others that, Brett Baer and some others who get the news imprimatur. But he was really the one who had the most sort of mainstream cred. And yet, he played his role at Fox News.
Yeah, he did a good job.
No, I don't mean that.
Oh, okay.
At cable news, I agree with you that, he was very willing to press politicians on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
And because he had the platform of that Sunday show, these are some of the few places where politicians sort of feel like they have to go on.
Yep.
So even if you give them a tough interview, they still are likely to come back. And so he was good at that and he was willing to do it. The thing with cable news is everyone is scripted into a role, right? And this is part of why you don't want to do cable news anymore. And I don't want to do cable news anymore. Although I would say, if there was a particular role where I felt like I could be useful in furthering conversation, I don't think either one of us rule it out entirely.
No, if I cared a lot about something, I would do it.
Of course, but you have to know going in what the part is that they want you to play. So, for example, as someone who's on the left, who went on Fox News a lot of times, I always knew that my job was either, that what they wanted me to do was either to be like, even Democrats are critical of X, Y, or Z thing on the Democratic side, or they want you to be like the, the paid heel, the idiot, right? To come on and either be like stupid or be hated or be, like just that person for the audience to serve as the villain. And for Chris Wallace, part of what his role at Fox News was to provide cover for the insanity that was happening in so many other parts of the network. So they point to Chris Wallace and they point to Brett Baier and they point to Martha McCallum and a few others to say, oh no, we have a serious news operation. And so in a way, they're providing cover for some of the more, ridiculous and absurd and inflammatory parts of the network. And even though I'm sure there are a lot of, sort of mainstream beltway journalists here who think very highly of Chris Wallace, the reality is he never pushed back on that direction of the network.
Yeah, he was definitely part of it.
Fully part of all of that, even as he was willing to do a lot of things better and with more character in his own program than other corners of the network would do. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is the CNN Plus piece, which is just like, I would love to know how much they're paying him.
He's already a multimillionaire. That's why I don't get it.
But the whole strategy for the CNN Plus thing is such trash.
Yeah,
like Casey Hunt and Chris Wallace, no one is going to watch these people. No one is going to pay to watch these people. Are you kidding me? Cable news has the audiences it does because you have, it's on in the background. It's ambient background noise. All these anchors are replaceable and totally interchangeable. And there are very, very few personalities who actually could draw people in on their own merits. It's not like a meritocracy out there on cable news. In fact, oftentimes they pick people who are sort of the most pablum and the most boring, not to upset the apple cart so that their sponsors don't get upset. So to think you're going to be able to go out into a more sort of free market space where you have to actually compete for viewer number one, that is not happening. It is not happening.
It is not happening at all. And I would say, what you described, that phenomenon, I think is at all three of these cable networks, right? The reality is that CNN is Chris Cuomo. It is Brian Stelter. It is the most ridiculous, clownish parts. And yes, they also have decent journalists. MSNBC is Rachel Maddow. It is Chris Hayes. It is Russiagate conspiracy for all of the great people that they may have covering. It's part of the most disgusting and difficult balance of all of these organizations. It is interesting, though. So apparently, and he's been leaking this obviously to the New York Times and all of them, he was very upset about that Tucker Carlson Patriot Purge documentary, which we've talked here about, in which they specifically explore whether the feds were involved on January 6th. I do think it is telling that also was the push point for him, for the dispatch neocons that we described previously, apparently for Brett Baier, also went to the head of the Fox News network. Again, Chris is obviously leaking this, and what the full story is, I don't know.
Yeah, I sort of don't buy it because just knowing how these contract talks go, when your contract is going to be up as a prominent, cable news host like Chris Wallace is, those conversations start a year before your contract ends.
So do you think it's like a convenient heel to be like, oh, it was Tucker?
I think so. And here's the other thing is like, look, I haven't watched it. I'm sure there are things in there that are outlandish and ridiculous and all of those things, right? Just based on what I have seen about the documentary. But if that's your problem, I'd respect it so much more if you went out and said something about it. Go out and own it and make the case. It's so cowardly. And that's kind of the point I was making earlier is he would make these little sort of subtle quips. Digs at different hosts' coverage, or he would plan himself as sort of a figure apart from the rest of the muck and the mud at Fox News. I just don't find that really honorable. If you have an issue with the direction of the coverage, especially now that you're leaving, say something. Don't just leak it to Deadline or whoever that was the real thing you were.
To the New York Times.
Right. Exactly, that you were unhappy with. Come out and make the case and let's talk about it. So that's a part of this that I find, even as he exits, he's really unwilling to say what he actually thinks about Fox News or cable news writ large. The other thing that I was thinking about when I was, preparing to cover this story is obviously you have a lot of churn and turnover in cable news right now.
Right.
Cuomo was out, not because he wanted to be, but anyway, he's out. But over at MSNBC, Brian Williams is leaving. Rachel Maddow.
Right,
Pierce,
she's out.
Her daily show, she'll stay at MSNBC, but it looks like her daily show is going to end in the spring. And I really think that even cable news hosts are sort of sick of cable news.
I think you're right.
That's part of what he's saying here is like, I don't really want to do this game anymore. I'd like to interview some other people in a different format. And this is because having been a cable news host, I can tell you, it's soul sucking. And especially now when their ratings are such trash and they can't even pretend like they're on top of the world. It's, I think they find the format also like sort of brain deadening and stultifying and all that stuff. So that's part of why you see a number of people making the move to the exits.
I think what always made it work for them is that they were famous. They were important. And the real reality of it is like, in a disaster movie or something, and then they would pay like CNN's John King to be in the movie and be like, the Joker is taking over something.
Yeah.
Would they really do that today? I was watching a documentary, I forget what it's called, and they actually played a clip of Tim Ferriss on his podcast. It was The Alpinist, and it was about this guy. He was a very young guy who he died, but he was a very skilled mountain climber and alpinist and free spirit. Anyway, but I remember watching that and being like, wow, they're not playing a clip from cable. They're playing a clip from a podcast in which he talks about this guy. And I was like, that is like the flippening of power, as in they recognize that is where the valuable conversation and the cultural power is. And so I think for many of these people, it probably drives them mad that a lot of the people are having them on in the background while they're listening to a Joe Rogan or their favorite comedy podcast or a My Favorite Murder or what if Dak Shepard, whatever the hell he's doing, or Breaking Points. Any of these things. And for them to lose that, it wasn't just about the money, because let me tell you, these people are all miserable and they all work terrible hours as well. So they're all like pretty crazy. So that was what made it so worth it for them. And I think in Chris's mind, he's jumping into the streaming game where the real cultural relevance is. He just doesn't realize, dude, nobody's going to pay.
They don't.
Why would you pay for that?
Deluded themselves into thinking that people actually care about them and what they have to say.
Yeah.
And so, I think you're right about this. This is a point that Glenn makes a lot, is there's a lot of jealousy of people who are independent, who are in the podcast field or have YouTube shows or whatever, because they sort of feel like, at least the more honest and self-aware of them feels like, well, I had to sell out some of my principles to be able to play the game here. And now you're able to make a living and do what you want and have total freedom, and you actually get to say what you think about everything and choose which topics you're gonna cover and have total control and not be subject to this toxic top-down bureaucracy that exists at all of these networks. And so I think people like Chris Wallace, potentially, Casey Hunt, potentially, they delude themselves into thinking oh, maybe I could have that too, but you've already sold out. Your credibility is too late. I'm sorry, that ship has sailed. But I do think that does drive. Part of it is even they feel like they recognize, I've talked to these, a number of these hosts, they recognize how crappy the medium is and how depressing it is to do these short segments where you can never actually dig into an issue and where you have very little control over what the topics are, and you've got to pretend like you really care about whatever issue of the day or Trump outrage of the day or whatever 6th. It is, when sometimes you do and sometimes you really don't. It is soul-sucking, and so when they look at people who have that freedom and independence and are gaining in cultural relevance, they feel jealous.
They definitely do. I think it's a big part of it. Chris, we wish you the best, but we'll probably never hear about you ever again. So. Sorry, man. I don't know what else.
Sometimes the truth hurts. Yeah. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut. Our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions. All that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.